So we're going to talk a little bit about what, when we say strategy, what are we even talking about? We're going to be hearing from my colleagues David and Zoe in just a moment. But where we start at Kaleidoscope is that we normally go wrong the sort of the first moment we talk about strategy without actually being clear what it is we mean. So the definition we use is the matter of fact, straightforward one. I think probably the one you get if you Google it. So strategy being a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. For us at Kaleidoscope, though, that sort of misses the point just to try and define strategy. What's far more interesting is actually to think about what defines good strategy. There are 101 million different books you can buy about strategy, of which probably would recommend you read about 2. One of which is a book by Richard Rumelt. Some of you might have seen Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which is a genuinely good book. But our definition of good strategy very much based on what Richard writes about in that book. In terms of good strategy, yes, it's a plan of action, but what it does is that it has a clear understanding of where you are, where you want to be, has a set of guiding overall principles and coherent actions to focus energy, not just a shopping list, but coherent actions to focus energy. And we're going to be getting into detail as we go through today about what's required to do that.
And I should start by saying I'm not a strategy cynic, but I think one of the biggest problems with strategy is that the word itself doesn't really mean anything to most people. They think it's just jargon. It's not a real thing.
So what we find works is to involve as many people as possible, and I mean, dozens and hundreds of people, very closely in every stage of the strategy process, right from initial research to the final narrative. So at every stage, we're connecting the strategic questions, which the board worry about every day, those strategic questions facing the organization or the system or the collaboration, and we're connecting those with the everyday lived experience of those who work in the organization or work within that system, so that strategy becomes connected to and therefore as real as their own real working lives.
I suppose the next problem then is that people don't know what to do with the strategy when they might feel like they have to have one, but it's a bit of a sort of tick box thing. So you get a strategy, it's produced, it's published on the website, and nobody uses it, nobody looks at it even, and it just reinforces that idea that this is all a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, and that's a really familiar issue, isn't it, as well? And it can happen even to the best organizations, because things change, time moves on, people change, you might get a change of leadership, and that can happen. But what we found is that you can reduce that risk, and I don't want to put it any more strongly than that, but you can reduce that risk by letting the genie out of the bottle in the conversations that you have to develop the strategy. So because you're having real conversations that people want to have, and then you're helping them to agree together what needs to change, then the content of the strategy becomes part of everyday conversation. So it's those real conversations, not so much the document, that are the heart of the strategy. And you can go on to write down what you've agreed, but that's not the main point. And actually, sometimes some of our clients don't actually bother to write it down. They just have the conversation. But if there is a document, then if people have made real verifiable commitments about how things are going to change in conversation with each other and in large numbers, it's much less likely to gather dust on a website somewhere.
And yeah, and that comes, I suppose, to my final bugbear about strategy, which is that when you have one, but it's just totally unrealistic, and you'll have organizations that are trying to set great new standards in healthcare, but you'll have clinicians that don't have scrubs to wear, you'll have an operating system of Microsoft DOS or something like that still running, and it's just it's not in any way realistic for the people who are being asked to deliver it.
Yeah, and again, that's a real risk, and I think it's of all of the things that you brought, it's probably the hardest to deal with, because I think people always do hope for the best, don't they? I think it's got a name, it's called optimism bias. I mean, we find that if the strategy emerges from real conversations among everyone involved, all the stakeholders, then it's less likely to have that pie in the sky feeling, and the aspiration emerges from today's reality. So it's not a rejection of everyday reality, but actually comes out of it. So it's grounded in what's possible, and it grows out of what's good in the current situation, what is actually there, but is good and is already in place. So it's not pie in the sky aspiration, it's a conversation about what's best, about what's already there, and that grounds it in that reality. Yeah, has that sort of dealt with it for you a bit, Zoe?
A little bit.
A little bit.
No.
Okay, so if we have the next slide, please. So as you heard, I think the main thing that we want to draw attention to is that it's about the process, not the PDF. It's about the conversation, not the document. So if you focus on the conversations that lead to the strategy, you can focus on purpose and direction really precisely and iteratively as you go through the conversations. And even while you're having those conversations, you're actually preparing the ground for the change that you want to make. So you accelerate the ability to change, and the relationships are energized by having the conversations and by talking about what is possible in the current circumstances and challenging each other to be genuine and to be realistic. And if the conversations are broad-based and involve lots of people, then you will hear voices that are not normally heard, and they can be really transformative, those seldom heard voices, and that can make all the difference as well. So the benefits are not presented by the document, they're presented by the process, by the conversations that lead up to the document, and that's really the learning that we want to share today.